The wind cut across the broken land like sharp knives, carrying dust and ash. The world was silent except for the sound of the storm rolling over the ruined ground. An alien woman walked slowly, her bare feet pressing against the cold earth. Her steps were weak, her eyes empty. She had nowhere to go, nowhere to rest. Her clothes were torn, her skin pale from hunger. She was thin like a shadow. Once she had a family, once she had a people, but war had taken everything. Her home was burned, her kind scattered. She was left with nothing. Now she wandered across the wasteland, sleeping under rocks, hiding from beasts at night. She pulled her thin arms around herself, shivering. The cold night was falling again. The stars above gave no comfort. They only reminded her how small she was, how lost she had become. Her stomach growled, but there was no food. Only stones. Only dust. She whispered to herself in her alien tongue. Words of memory, words of sorrow. Maybe if she spoke, she would not feel so alone, but her voice broke like glass. She lowered her head and walked on. Then she heard a sound. Her body froze. It was not the sound of the wind. It was something else. A crunch of boots on stone. Her heart began to race. Fear took her body. Had the raiders returned? They hated her kind. They would kill her if they found her. She crouched low, hiding behind a broken wall, her breath short and quick. The sound grew closer. Footsteps, heavy, strong, whoever it was. They were not afraid of the night. She peered through a crack in the wall, and her eyes widened. It was a human. The human walked with a pack on his back, tall and broad, his clothes dusty from travel. He moved with purpose, but his eyes scanned the land like a hunter. She had heard of humans before. Some aliens said they were dangerous. Others said they were strange, but she had never seen one this close. Fear and curiosity fought inside her chest. Should she run? Should she hide? Or should she wait? Her legs trembled. She had no strength to run far, and if he was a killer, she could not escape. The human stopped suddenly. He turned his head, his eyes fixed on the broken wall where she hid. She gasped, pulling back, pressing her body against the cold stone, but it was too late. He had seen her. Silence hung heavy between them. Only the wind howled. Then the human spoke, his voice deep, calm, but she could not understand his words. They were strange sounds to her. Still, his tone was not sharp, not cruel. It was softer, like he was asking a question. She shook her head, trying to show she did not understand, her eyes wide, her body tense, ready to flee. The human slowly reached into his pack. Her heart leapt. Was it a weapon? Her hands shook, her body screamed for her to run, but then he pulled out something else, a piece of bread, rough and simple, but food. He held it out toward her, not moving closer, just waiting. Her stomach twisted, her hunger screamed, but her mind warned her of tricks, yet his eyes did not look cruel. They looked tired, honest. She stared at the bread, then at him, her throat dry. Minutes passed. The storm howled, but she did not move. Finally, with trembling hands, she reached out, from behind the wall, her fingers brushing the bread. The human did not pull back. He let her take it. She ate quickly, crumbs falling, tears stinging her eyes. She had not tasted food for days, maybe weeks. The human watched quietly, saying nothing. He only waited. When she finished, she looked at him again, still afraid, still lost, but also confused. Why would a human feed her? No one had ever helped her since she lost her people. No one cared if she lived or died. The human then picked up a stone from the ground, heavy and solid. She frowned, watching carefully. What was he doing? He set it down with care, then picked another. He stacked it on top of the first, slowly, firmly. Her eyes followed his hands, confused. What was he building? The human looked at her once more, then back at the stones, his eyes calm. Steady, he spoke again in his strange words, but though she could not understand, something in his voice told her one thing. He was not leaving her here. For the first time in months, the alien woman felt something small but powerful inside her chest. It was not hunger, not fear. It was something she had forgotten. It was hope. But hope was dangerous. She knew the world could break it easily. Still, she could not look away from the human and his stones. And in that silent night, under the empty stars, a strange beginning took root, an alien with nowhere to go, and a human who had chosen to stop walking, chosen to build. The storm howled louder. Shadows moved across the ruined land. Danger was never far, but she stayed, watching, waiting, afraid yet drawn close, for something was happening here, something she could not yet name. But one thing was clear: her life was about to change forever. The alien woman did not sleep that night. She sat in silence, watching the strange human. His hands never stopped moving. He placed one stone after another, his face calm but focused. He worked as if the stones were alive, as if each piece held meaning. She had never seen anyone do such a thing before. Most people only cared for weapons, food, or escape. Yet this human worked with dirt and rock, shaping them like they were treasures. The fire from his small camp lit his strong arms. Shadows stretched across the ground. Every move seemed steady, patient. Her body was weak, but her eyes could not turn away. She wanted to ask him why he was doing this, but her words would not reach him. They spoke different tongues, different worlds. Still, she felt his purpose. At dawn, the first light broke over the land. Golden rays touched the stones, and she gasped. The human had built the start of a wall. Not large, not strong, but real. She blinked, her heart beating fast. He was building something. For her, the human stood, stretching his back, his breath heavy. He looked at her, his face unreadable. Then he pointed at the stones, then at her, then back at the stones. She frowned, not fully understanding, but his eyes told her more than words could. This was not for him. This was for her. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe, but the world had never given her such kindness. She touched the rough surface of the stone wall, her hand shaking. It was solid, real. The human picked up another stone, but this one was too large. He struggled, his muscles straining, sweat on his face. Still, he did not stop. He placed it down with force. The wall grew higher. She stepped closer, her bare feet pressing into the cold ground, her eyes wide, her fear still alive but softer. Now she bent down, picked up a smaller stone and placed it near the wall. The human paused, watching her, his face changed. A small smile touched his lips, not mocking, not cruel, but warm. She felt heat in her chest, confused by the feeling. For hours they worked together, the human carrying heavy stones, the alien woman passing smaller ones. Their hands touched the same surface again and again. They built in silence, only the wind and the sound of rock filling the air. The wall slowly grew, taller, wider, like a shield against the empty land. Each stone was a promise. Each stone said she was not alone, but the land did not forget. Danger was always near. By afternoon, dark shapes moved in the distance, shadows of raiders, their sharp eyes searching, their voices echoing. The alien woman froze, panic in her eyes. She grabbed the human's arm, pointing at the shadows. Her heart racing, she whispered fast in her tongue, begging him to stop, begging him to hide. The human looked at the figures, his jaw tight. Then he shook his head. He did not stop. He picked up another stone, placed it down with strength. Her fear burned hotter. She thought he was mad. They would see him, they would come, they would destroy everything. Yet he stood tall, his body like iron, his eyes filled with fire. She crouched low, whispering, "Please, please." Even though he could not understand, her tears fell. The raiders' shadows grew smaller, moving away. The land swallowed them once more. She let out a long breath, her body weak with relief. The human finally looked at her, his eyes calm, as if to say, "Do not fear." She stared at him, her mind confused. Why would he not run? Why would he risk himself? No one had ever risked anything for her. As the day turned to night, they sat by the wall they had built, the fire burning low. She watched the stones glow under the flame. She touched them again, her hand steady now. The human broke a piece of food, handing half to her. She hesitated. then took it, chewing slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. In that moment, she realized something dangerous, something she was almost afraid to name: trust. Her life had been full of betrayal, of loss. But here, with this human and his stones, she felt a seed of trust grow. Tiny, fragile, but alive. When the night deepened, the human lay back against the wall. Closing his eyes, she sat near him, hugging her knees, the stars above shining, cold and distant. But tonight felt different. For the first time in so long, she was not lying alone on the ground, not hiding in fear. There was a wall beside her, a fire near her, and a human who had chosen to stay. As she closed her eyes, a thought came uninvited, soft and terrifying. Maybe I can belong again. But she did not know that danger was already moving. Unseen eyes watching from far away, voices whispering in the dark, enemies who would not allow a human and alien to build peace together. The wall stood strong through the night, but the true test had only just begun. The next morning, the alien woman woke to the sound of stone striking stone. Her eyes opened slowly, and there he was again. The human, his body bent forward, his hands lifting heavy rocks, his face covered in sweat. He worked as if nothing else in the world mattered. She sat up, rubbing her tired eyes. The wall was higher now, wider too, its shape beginning to look like a shelter. Her heart beat faster. She touched the stones with her thin fingers. They were rough, cold, but real. But the sky was not kind. Black clouds rolled above, thick and heavy. The wind turned sharp, dust rising. She felt fear. This land did not forgive weakness. Storms came without mercy. The human looked up too. He saw the clouds, but instead of stopping, he worked faster, his arms pulling, lifting, placing, his breath hard. She wanted to cry out, to tell him it was useless, that the storm would break everything, but she had no words he could understand, so she tried another way. She moved beside him, taking a smaller stone, pressing it into place, her hands shaking. The human paused, his eyes meeting hers. Then he nodded once, strong and sure, and they kept building together. Hours passed. The sky darkened. Thunder cracked. Across the land, the air smelled of acid rain. Her heart raced. She remembered nights hiding in caves, her skin burning from poison drops. She remembered crying out for family that never came. And now the storm fell. The rain hissed as it touched the earth, smoke rising from the ground. Drops stung her arms like fire. She gasped, covering her head, running toward the half-built wall. The human grabbed his cloak from his pack, threw it over her shoulders, shielding her fragile body. She looked at him, her eyes wide, her chest shaking. He stood tall against the burning rain, the water biting his skin, but he did not hide. He pushed another stone into place. Her lips trembled. She wanted to scream, "Why are you doing this?" But the words were trapped inside her. Still, she followed him, placing rocks as best as her small hands could, even as the rain burned, even as the wind howled. Together they built, piece by piece, until the wall stood high enough to shield them. The human pulled her under the half-roof of stones, their bodies pressed close, the storm screaming outside. She sat shaking, the cloak heavy on her shoulders. The human's arm scratched and bleeding from the rain, but he did not look broken. He looked alive, his eyes full of fire. The storm raged for hours, beating the land, washing away dust, breaking weak roots, but the wall stood firm. It did not fall. When the rain finally ended, the sky was red with sunset, the earth steaming. She stepped out slowly, her body weak but alive, her eyes wide as she looked at what they had built, a wall that had resisted the storm. Tears filled her eyes, not of pain, but something else, something strange. She had survived storms before, but always alone, hiding, afraid. This was the first time she had faced it with someone, and together they had stood strong. The human sat on a rock, his breath heavy, his arms covered in marks, but when she looked at him, he gave a small smile, not proud, not mocking, just simple, calm, as if to say, "We did it." Her chest hurt. She turned her face away, afraid of the feelings rising inside. Trust, safety, things she thought were lost, forever. But danger was never far that night as the fire burned low. Strange eyes glowed in the distance. Wild beasts moving near, their bodies crawling across the rocks, their fangs shining. Her heart leapt. She whispered fast in fear, pulling at the human's arm. He stood, taking a sharp stick from his pack, his body ready. His eyes locked on the creatures. He motioned for her to stay behind the wall, but she refused. Her small hands shaking, she picked up a stone, holding it close. Her legs weak, but her spirit awake. The beasts growled, circling, their shadows long. The human shouted a sound loud and deep, striking his stick against the ground. The beasts froze, then moved closer. Her heart pounded, her breath broke. She thought death had come at last. But the human stepped forward, his voice strong, his eyes unbroken. He hurled his stick, striking the ground near the beasts, the firelight flashing. The creatures hissed, their bodies shrinking back. Then they turned, crawling into the dark, their glowing eyes fading into the night. She collapsed to her knees, her hands trembling, her tears falling fast. The human came to her, placing a hand on her shoulder, his touch steady. For the first time, she did not pull away. She looked up. At him, her lips parted, whispering in her tongue words he could not understand, words soft and full of broken hope. Thank you. Thank you. He did not know the meaning, but he knew the feeling, and he nodded once firm. As the night closed in, she sat beside the wall, her head resting against the stone, her eyes watching the human's shadow in the firelight. She was still afraid of tomorrow, afraid of enemies, afraid of the dark world. But now she was not afraid of being alone, and deep inside she felt the truth. This was only the beginning. Morning came soft and gray. The storm had passed, but the land was scarred. The ground was black with ash where the rain had burned. Pools of poisoned water steamed. The alien woman stepped carefully, her bare feet cold, her body weak. Yet her eyes were fixed on the stones. The wall was still standing, rough but strong, proof of their struggle through the night. She placed her hand against it, feeling its weight, its promise. Her heart whispered something she had not dared feel for many seasons. Safety. The human rose early, his body stiff from sleep, but he did not rest long. He lifted stones again, his arms moving with steady rhythm, his breath deep, his face determined. He was not finished. Not yet. She watched him for a while, then bent down, picking up smaller rocks. She carried them to the wall, her steps slow but sure. When she placed them down, the human looked at her. Their eyes met, and for the first time she smiled. A small, fragile smile, but real. He nodded, and together they worked, hour after hour. The sound of stone against stone filled the air. The sun rose higher, shining across their growing wall. Soon the wall became 2, then 3, forming the shape of a home, an open space in the middle where fire burned and shadows gathered. Her thin arms trembled as she carried stone after stone, but she did not stop. Not while he kept moving, not while hope kept her alive. As the walls rose, she began to feel something else. Belonging. She was no longer drifting across empty land, no longer unseen. Every stone she placed felt like a mark of her existence, like proof that she mattered. But the world did not like peace. That afternoon, voices carried across the wind, rough voices, cruel laughter. Her blood froze. She recognized them, raiders, the same kind who had destroyed her people. She dropped the stone in her hands, her body shaking. The human noticed at once. He placed a hand on his weapon, a simple metal blade he carried at his side, his eyes sharp, steady. He looked at her, asking without words, "Who are they?" Her lips trembled. She whispered their name in her tongue, a sound filled with hate. Then she pointed at the horizon where shadows moved closer. The raiders walked with arrogance, their armor made of scraps, their weapons sharp. They saw the wall rising from the land and laughed, mocking. "Stone house in the wasteland?" One of them shouted in a broken tongue. "Who builds for trash?" The alien woman pulled back, hiding behind the wall. Fear gripped her chest. She remembered fire, screams, chains. She remembered everything they had taken. Her legs weakened. She wanted to run, But the human stepped forward, not far from the wall, his body tall, his blade shining, his voice steady as he shouted back, words she did not understand, but his tone was clear, strong. The raiders laughed louder, 5 of them, bigger than her, armed and cruel. They moved closer, circling, their eyes on her, their words sharp. Alien slave hiding behind human, pathetic. Her body shook. Tears filled her eyes. She grabbed the human's arm, begging him to stop, begging him to run, but he did not move. He only placed a hand over hers, steady and firm, as if to say, "Trust me." The first raider charged, swinging a rusty blade. The human blocked, steel clashing against steel. The sound rang across the wasteland. The fight had begun. The alien woman cried out, her heart tearing. She picked up a stone, clutching it tight. She had no weapon, no strength, but she could not sit in silence. Not this time. The battle was fierce. The human fought with skill, his blade fast, his steps sure. But the raiders were many. One cut his arm, blood spilling. She screamed, throwing her stone at the attacker, hitting his shoulder. He snarled. Turning toward her, her legs froze, fear holding her still. But before the raider could strike, the human pushed forward, his blade cutting across, forcing the enemy back. The others hesitated, surprised by the human's strength. He shouted again, his voice like thunder, warning them, daring them to continue. For a moment, silence hung. The raiders looked at each other, then spat on the ground. "Not worth it," one growled. "Stonewall will fall on its own." With cruel laughter, they pulled back, fading into the dust. The alien woman fell to her knees, her hands covering, her face, tears pouring. She had seen death close again, but it had not taken her. Not this time. The human crouched beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, his voice calm, quiet, even though she could not understand. His tone carried comfort. Slowly she lowered her hands, looking into his eyes, her voice weak, broken. She whispered, Why help me?" He did not answer with words. He simply picked up another stone, set it into place, and looked at her with steady eyes, as if to say, "Because you deserve a home." Her chest ached. Her tears would not stop. But this time they were not only of pain, they were of something new, something bright. That night, as firelight danced against the rising walls, she sat close to the human, the stones around them glowing warm. The world outside still dangerous, still cruel, but inside these walls, for the first time she felt safe, and deep inside, a seed of courage began to grow, a seed that whispered, "I will not run anymore." The walls were rising, not just of stone, but of trust, of hope, of a bond stronger than fear. The days passed slowly, and the walls grew higher, stone after stone, placed with care. The alien woman's hands were raw, her fingers cut from sharp edges, but she did not stop. Every piece she carried made her heart lighter. The home was no longer just the human's work. It was theirs by now. The walls formed a circle, strong enough to keep out the wind, high enough to hide them from wandering eyes. The roof was still missing, but the fire inside burned brighter each night. She sat by the flames one evening, her knees hugged to her chest, watching the human carve wood with his knife. He shaped tools from broken branches, his face calm, his focus sharp. She wanted to speak, to ask why he cared so much, but the words in her tongue would not reach him. So she stayed quiet, listening to the crackling fire. For a short moment she allowed herself to feel safe, to believe the world outside could not reach her here. But safety never lasted. The first sign was silence, the kind that pressed heavy on the chest. No wind, no bird cry, only stillness. The human noticed it too. He looked up, his eyes narrowing, his body tense. Then came the sound, faint at first, then louder, boots crunching over stone, many boots moving together. Her blood turned to ice, her body froze. She knew that sound. The raiders had returned. The human stood, blade in hand, his eyes scanning the darkness. Shadows moved just beyond the firelight. Surrounding them, the raiders stepped into view, more than before, at least 10. Their armor black, their eyes cruel, their laughter sharp. One of them carried fire in a jar, its glow casting long shapes across the stones. Well, well. One called out in a harsh voice. The little alien rat found a pet human. His laughter rang out, ugly and cold. The alien woman trembled, pressing her back against the stone wall. Memories of chains, whips, and screams flooded her mind. Her chest burned with fear. She wanted to hide, to vanish. The human did not move back. He stood tall, his blade ready, his eyes locked on the raiders. The leader of the raiders stepped forward, his mouth twisted into a grin. You build walls? You think stones will protect you? We will break them and take what we want. His eyes flicked toward the alien woman, and her heart stopped. The human's hand tightened on his blade, his jaw clenched, his body a wall of iron. He said words, in his tongue, strong and sharp, though she could not understand. His meaning was clear. Over my dead body. The raiders roared with laughter, then charged. The first clash was thunderous, blades striking, sparks flying. The human moved like a storm, blocking, striking, forcing back the first attacker, but another came from the side, swinging wide. The alien woman screamed, grabbing a stone from the ground. She hurled it with all her strength, striking the raider's head. He staggered, cursing, giving the human a chance to slash across his chest. But there were too many. They circled, pressing, close, their weapons sharp, their rage fierce. The alien woman's heart raced. She wanted to run, to hide behind the wall, but something inside her broke free. She picked up another stone, then another, throwing them with trembling hands, shouting in her alien tongue, her fear turning to fire. The human fought harder, his blade flashing in the firelight, his arm bleeding from cuts, his breath ragged, yet he did not fall. He pushed forward again and again, his back never turning, his eyes never leaving hers, as if her presence gave him strength. The raiders grew. Angry, their leader shouted, "Burn it down!" One lifted the jar of fire, hurling it against the wall. Flames burst across the stones, smoke rising. The alien woman cried out, rushing to the fire, beating it with her cloak, coughing, choking. She would not let their home burn, not after everything. The human roared, striking down another raider, his blade cutting deep, his voice shaking the night. The raiders hesitated, their confidence breaking. The leader snarled, "This is not the end, alien rat, human fool." He spat on the ground, retreating. The others pulled back, dragging their wounded, their laughter turning bitter as they vanished into the shadows. Silence fell heavy. The fire on the stones smoldered, smoke rising. The alien woman collapsed to her knees, tears streaming, her hands black with ash, her chest heaving. The human dropped beside her, his blade still in hand, his arm bleeding, his body shaking with exhaustion, yet his eyes found hers, steady, alive. She touched, his hand, her fingers trembling, her voice breaking as she whispered in her tongue, "Home, my home." Though he could not understand, he seemed to know. His lips curved into a tired smile, and he placed his bloodied hand against the wall, as if to say, "We will not give up." The alien woman wept, but this time her tears carried more than fear. They carried fire, courage, a promise that she would never abandon this place, never abandon him. The night was quiet again, but danger still lingered. Enemies would return, storms would come, yet the walls stood tall, scarred but unbroken, and so did they. The night after the attack was heavy and long. The alien woman sat near the fire, her hands still black with ash, her eyes swollen from tears. The smell of smoke clung to her skin. The walls around them bore fresh scars, black marks where flames had licked the stone. She looked at the damage with trembling fear, but the wall still stood. It had not fallen. She touched the rough surface, whispering in her alien tongue, words of relief, words of sorrow. She turned her head toward the human who sat not far, wrapping a cloth around his bleeding arm. He had fought like iron, unbroken, unyielding. She could still see his figure in her mind, standing between her and the raiders, his blade flashing, his body a shield. Her chest tightened. She wanted to thank him, but no words could reach across their barrier of language. So she did the only thing she could. She tore a piece of cloth from her own clothing, crawled toward him, and placed it on his wound. Her hands gentle, careful. His eyes widened for a moment, then softened. He let her help, his silence full of trust. They sat together in the half-built shelter, fire crackling low, their shadows dancing against the stone walls. For the first time, since her people were destroyed, she felt something impossible: safety. When morning came, she rose early, stepping outside the walls. The air was sharp, the land still broken, but her fear was quieter now. She returned with water in a hollow stone, offering it to the human. He drank slowly, nodding his thanks. Day by day, they rebuilt the damage. Stone by stone, their hands raw, their bodies tired, yet they did not stop. Every rock they placed seemed heavier than before, but it also carried more meaning. The alien woman began to hum softly as she worked, an old melody from her people, a song of warmth once sung in her village before war. The human paused, listening, his head tilted, his eyes calm. He could not understand the words, but the sound filled the air with something tender. She noticed his gaze and stopped, her cheeks hot with embarrassment, but the human shook his head gently, motioning for her to continue, so she sang again, soft and low, her voice weaving between the stones. For a moment, the wasteland felt alive. That night, under the rising moon, she sat by the fire and finally spoke, her words quiet, though she knew he could not understand. She told him of her people, how they were hunted, how her mother was taken, how her village burned. Her tears fell with every word, her voice breaking again and again. The human listened, his face solemn. He did not look away. He placed a hand gently over hers, steady, warm. Though he did not know her words, he knew her pain, and she felt that deeply. Her chest ached, but in that ache was release. The burden she had carried alone was no longer only hers. She leaned her head against the cold stone wall, closing her eyes, whispering, "Thank you." The human's reply was silence, but silence that spoke of understanding. Over the next days, the walls grew into a full circle. The roof began to take shape, stone beams and wooden supports laid carefully. The alien woman laughed one afternoon. When the human nearly dropped a log on his foot, her laughter startled even herself. It was the first true laugh she had made in years. The human looked at her with surprise, then smiled, shaking his head, as if to say her laughter was worth every cut and bruise. But danger was not gone. At night they often heard distant shouts, the raiders plotting, beasts howling in the hills. Every sound brought fear. Yet inside the shelter, surrounded by stone, they held on to courage. One evening, the human lit the fire brighter, the flames warming the whole room. He pointed at the walls, then at her, then pressed his hand over his heart. She stared at him, confusion at first, then realization. He was telling her, "This is your home." Her eyes filled with tears, again but not of sorrow. These tears were of something stronger, a bond that had taken root like the foundation of their shelter. She stepped closer, placing her hand over his heart as he had done, then pointed at the walls, then at him, her meaning simple. "Our home." The human froze for a moment, then smiled, a rare smile that lit his weary face. He nodded once, firmly. That night, she did not sleep far from him as she once did. She curled closer to the fire where he sat, the warmth between them not only from the flames but from trust, fragile yet growing. The wasteland outside was still cruel. The raiders would return, storms would rise, beasts would hunt. But inside the stone walls, they had built something the world could not easily break, not just shelter but trust, and that trust was stronger than stone. The sun rose red over the wasteland, spilling light across the broken ground. The alien woman stood at the edge of the wall, her eyes wide as she looked at the shelter before her. It was no longer just a circle of stones, it had become something real, something strong. The walls now stood tall and unbroken, their surfaces rough but steady. The roof of wood and stone beams covered the top. Smoke from their fire curled gently into the sky. For the first time in her life, she looked at a place and thought, "This is home." Her thin hands touched the stones with care, every mark, Every scar on them reminded her of struggle, of storms survived, of raiders beaten back, of nights spent in fear but not in defeat. She smiled softly, tears stinging her eyes. The human stepped out from the doorway, his shoulders broad, his arms scarred, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes were alive. He carried another stone not because the shelter needed more, but because he refused to stop, because every stone was a promise. She laughed quietly, shaking her head. She moved to help, lifting a smaller rock. Together they placed it at the base, not out of necessity but out of ritual, a final seal to their work. When they stepped back, silence filled the air, but not empty silence. It was heavy with meaning. The shelter stood proud against the horizon, their creation, their survival. The alien woman turned to him, her lips parting. She whispered in her tongue, words soft but sure. "Our home." Her voice broke with emotion, though she knew he could not understand. Still, his eyes told her he did. He gave a small smile, then pressed his hand to the wall, strong and firm. She placed her hand beside his, their fingers nearly touching, warmth rising between them. But the world did not forgive peace so easily. As night fell, shadows stirred beyond the hills. The raiders had returned, this time in greater number, their torches glowing in the distance, their voices cruel. "Break it down! Burn them out!" The alien woman's blood ran cold. Fear clawed at her chest, but when she looked at the human, he stood tall, his blade in hand, his face unshaken. She wanted to beg him to run, to hide, but the walls behind them whispered courage. They had built this together. They would not abandon it. The raiders charged, their shouts cutting through the night. But when they reached the walls, their blades struck only stone, sparks flying. Their fire could not catch. The stones held firm. From inside, the human struck back with strength, his blade flashing through gaps, his roars shaking the air. The alien woman threw stones from above, her voice shouting in defiance, no longer weak, no longer silent. The raiders fought hard, but the wall stood stronger. Every attack broken, every fire smothered, their faces twisted with rage. Yet they could not breach what human hands and alien hope had built. Finally, beaten and bloodied, the raiders cursed, retreating into the dark, their voices fading into the wasteland. Silence returned once more. But this time, it was victory's silence. The fire inside their shelter burned steady, its smoke curling into the star-filled sky. The alien woman collapsed to her knees, laughter and tears mixing, her hands covering her face. She could not believe it. They had endured. They had won. The human sat beside her, his breath heavy, his blade red, his body trembling, but his eyes still alive. She looked at him through, her tears, her lips trembling. She reached out, her hand resting on his arm. Gentle, warm for the first time, she did not only see him as savior, she saw him as family. Together they stepped inside the finished shelter, the walls scarred but unbroken, the firelight filling every corner. No longer just stone and wood. It was alive with meaning. The alien woman lay on the floor of smooth stone, her eyes on the roof above. She whispered softly to herself, words she never thought she would say again. "I am home." The human sat near her, his back against the wall, his eyes closing, his lips curved in a tired but peaceful smile. The night outside was still dangerous. Storms would still come. Beasts would still roam. Enemies would still rise. But inside those walls they had something greater, not just shelter, but trust. Not just walls, but belonging. Not just survival, but a bond that no enemy could break. The alien woman closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she fell asleep without fear, without running, without hunger. The fire's warmth covering her like a blanket, the human's presence steady as the stones around them. And so, in the middle of a ruined world where dust and sorrow once ruled, an alien woman with nowhere to go found her place, because a human chose to build, not just with stone, but with heart. The wasteland would remember their shelter, not as broken rock, but as proof that when trust is built, even the cruelest land cannot destroy it. For stone can make a house, but only courage and kindness can make it a home.